You are listening to the Real Men Feel Show with your hosts Andy Grant and Appio Hunter. Real Men Feel is all about encouraging men to allow and express all of their emotions. Despite what you may have been taught, all emotions do serve you. Real Men Feel is committed to opening up discussions that most men aren't having, but you certainly don't need to be a man to join us. The Real Men Feel podcast is produced live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern for your growth and enjoyment. You can find more information about the Real Men Feel movement at realmenfeel.org. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe on iTunes by visiting realmenfeel.org/iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter at realmenfeel.org and at facebook.com/realmenfeelshow. All links mentioned in each episode are in the show notes found on the blog at realmenfeel.org. This is a weekly program, and your comments, feedback, and participation are welcome during the live show and anytime in the Facebook group, on Twitter, or at realmenfeel.org. Now, let's get into this week's show. Hello and welcome to Real Men Feel. We are very glad that you're joining us for our, can you believe it, 62nd episode of this fine program. I am your host, Andy Grant. I'm a transformational energy coach, author, speaker, and I actually seem to be falling apart since our last episode. I have a sprained right wrist, and I have a torn muscle in my left arm. I have poison ivy from my knees to my neck. And if left to my own miserable devices, I would have blown this show off. I honestly would have. I've been hiding in bed and watching way too much TV and just feeling gross. But luckily, I'm not left to my own moodiness. I have the all-powerful, ever-smiling Mr. Appio Hunter as my co-host.
Hey, Andy. Man, when I saw everything that was happening, I'm like, dude, I'm definitely holding lots of space for you so you can feel good.
Yeah, I began this year, I keep saying, I'm willing to let go of all that does not serve me. But then as limbs start to go and my skin erupts, I'm like, maybe I'm asking for the wrong things here.
Yeah, your skin could serve you for sure.
Yeah. So I'm very glad that we're talking about something different than me falling apart. It makes a much more entertaining program tonight. Our guest tonight is speaker, author, and coach Reverend Jody Bailey, joining us to talk about intimacy and men's challenges to intimacy. So welcome, Reverend Jody.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Appio. I'm excited to be here tonight.
Awesome. Now, we were talking a little bit before the show about how to introduce yourself, and you have a number of different ways to refer to yourself, and joking that they're not all kind of caught on. So sometimes and we joked about, if you call yourself a sex coach, people think that you're giving play-by-play and telling what goes where in the bedroom kind of stuff, right? But you prefer the term a sexologist?
Well, that probably is the most understandable.
So what would a sexologist be?
Well, certainly I can help people with the basics about intimacy and sexuality. But one of the things that people don't realize is that our sex energy is at the core of everything we are. And so it does affect our health, wealth, and happiness. So I like to help people make sure that they have a healthy sex energy. And that way, they can help heal trauma, health, a lot of different things. So my focus is more on the healing aspect.
Cool. So let's dive right in, because I hear this term a lot, and the term is intimacy. And sometimes I think, well, intimacy is code for sex, or it means, but you can have sex without intimacy, and then it's just like going through the numbers. You're just like exercising with somebody. But so what does intimacy mean to you and in your work?
Well, intimacy tends to scare people, and I don't want that to happen. Intimacy is as simple as, when my grandson is sitting on my lap and we're reading a book together. When I'm with a friend and we're in a very deep conversation and we're very present. When I meet a new person and we both enjoy hugs, and so we exchange a hug for the first time, all of that is intimacy.
Cool. So it definitely is not only a sexual issue. Is it more the feeling of connection in any way with another human being?
Well, that's absolutely what it is. And we shouldn't actually intertwine sex and intimacy because they're exclusive. You can have intimacy without sex and sex without intimacy, or you can combine them.
So what are some of the common blocks that you've encountered in men to intimacy, be it sexual intimacy or just feeling intimacy?
The biggest block, unfortunately, is social conditioning. Men are told that they can't feel intimacy, that they're not supposed to desire intimacy, which is really unfortunate because that tends to be the majority of the people that take advantage of my services are men that are really starved for intimacy.
And, Jody, when you and I have talked in the past, we have had that conversation about the social conditioning and the hang-ups that people have, particularly men, that they have about the whole intimacy and so forth. And they seem to have even more issues. I mean, they already have their hang-ups when you're talking about just the word intimacy. There's a lot of emotional baggage that's associated with that. And they oftentimes have that challenge relating to women because of that. But sometimes there's even more of a challenge with them being able to relate to each other if you bring on that word intimacy involved. And when you're talking about just having an intimate conversation with a friend, it's like, oh my God, no, oh no, homo type stuff. And have you encountered that frequently in with your clients and the men who come to you?
Absolutely. And I see change happening right now. Mm-hmm. It used to be joked about a lot. The bromance was considered, a way for men to kind of jab each other. But that's really becoming an in thing for men to be allowed to have intimate relationships with each other, and it doesn't have to have any kind of social stigma to it. It's just a closeness between men, and there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean they're gay. It doesn't mean that they're anything other than two human beings wanting to relate.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, at least in the Latin culture anyway, there's, lots of hang-ups of, between men and men, yet at the same time, they can be found like just being, at least here in the United States, we would, interpret it to be, that physical closeness with each other. Could be like, oh, it's like a, more than just a bromance thing or whatever. And in other cultures as well, like for instance, in Africa and the Middle East, I've seen that as well, where men will walk, down the road hand in hand with each other, and it's not sexual at all. They are, they're basically sharing that deep appreciation that they have for each other. So on that note, I mean, have you dealt with people from other cultures, or the people that you usually work with are exclusively from the United States that seem to have those issues? Have you encountered other points of view from other men, besides what we see the opening up right now in our culture as far as the whole bromance thing?
Well, most of my exposure has been within people within the United States and directly working with people also in the UK. I do get a lot of feedback from people in other countries, but I've never had anything specifically about the relationships between men. And, in all honesty, I tend to say I don't care what anyone thinks anyway. I think men should be okay with having an intimate relationship between each other. It does not have to mean sex, and that's where we need to break that thought process that sex is related to anything intimate.
So how do men that come to you or that you meet or anyway kind of identify and recognize in themselves that there's an intimacy problem?
Well, first off, I want to say this is where a person really shows themselves to be ready to move towards any next step, and to attract other people, whether it be for a romantic relationship or a friendship or whatever. Authenticity is beautiful.
Love that.
So when a person can just fully open up and say, this is who I am, and be vulnerable, that is just attractive in anything.
Cool. So Real Men Feel's been an intimate program all this time without us realizing it, Appio.
I guess so, yeah.
I like that.
That's awesome.
And it's funny that the bromance is, I mean, I've kind of heard the term coming out of almost reality TV and things like that, but it was always in sports and in competition that men were allowed and encouraged. You could touch each other and you could hug each other after a win and pat the fanny and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, not in corporate America, not walking down the street. But it does seem to be giving, there's a little bit more softening there about the social conditioning. Are you seeing that more and more? Or do you think, or do you find that men are getting even more uptight?
No, I think it's becoming more acceptable. Maybe that's just because of my social circles, but I do belong to a lot of groups that are a lot more open. And I'll give you an example. There's basically a body appreciation group. And it's where people are just allowed to kind of shed their fears and such about their body and be able to love themselves and get a healthy body image. Well, there's no thought to a man complimenting another man on some part of his physique. It's beautiful and it's totally accepted in the group.
That reminds me of an episode I remember seeing one time on, I forget the name of the show, but it was on Viceland. And it was an episode where this person actually went to the biggest gathering of bears, the gay subculture. And, there's a straight guy who goes to this big, giant gathering in Provincetown, Massachusetts. And one of the things that he experienced, because a lot of, especially in that particular subculture of the gay male community, is there's a lot of hang-ups about that body image, the fear of, will I be rejected? And he ended up going to a group very similar to the one that you were talking about, the body appreciation group. And he came out of that and he said, you know what? That was probably one of the most intimate, loving experiences I've ever had, and there's no sex involved. And it was amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've never heard of those.
I really...
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, we have a delay.
I really am amazed at the beauty of what goes on when people can shed the clothes, basically. And I mean that actually, but metaphorically as well, when they can just shed that stuff and just be able to have an appreciation for each other and not have any worries about judgment or social expectations, or sexual attraction. I mean, that's setting a boundary up of saying, okay, this is non-sexual here. We can just be who we are and be in this space. It's really beautiful. But I want to say on that note, because you were talking about this men go into this retreat, I see more pain in men with body image issues, and they don't have a place to talk about that. And it's really kind of an ugly thing, I think, because there shouldn't be any place where both men and women can't feel safe and be authentic.
Have you found that because men don't have a place, they don't have any sort of like a safe space where they can talk about their body issue, and body image challenges and issues, that's probably one of the biggest causes of emotional aloofness, lack of intimacy?
I absolutely think it's a big contributor. That's why I was so excited to be on this show today, because I think you guys allow for a space for men to be authentic and be vulnerable. And truly, for any real woman, those things are endearing.
I hear that a lot. I hear that, women find a man who can truly just appreciate himself, all of his imperfections, like you said, being authentic. That is one of the most attractive things that can be there. Not their manliness, not their, the car they drive, or the type of cologne they wear, although that can be a factor as well. But just it's the showing up and being authentic.
Yeah.
That makes the cologne smell better.
Yeah, the clothing, the cologne, the cars, those are all, can be for some people part of the mask that they hide behind. But I'm sure there must be the authentic car for every person to drive, and an authentic cologne as well, right?
Well, pardon me. I think, well, and again, it may go to my social circles, but I know a lot of women that I surround myself, when someone starts to create this false idea of who they are, or put up this image, a lot of people just kind of turn and really don't show any interest in them. And so, and then you find this guy that he, is just being who he is, and he doesn't put up any pretenses, and he doesn't apologize for anything. That's the ones that the great women are surrounding.
Right, so it's not a false macho and bravado, but an authentic comfortableness in that man's own skin.
Yes. Well, and it's the same for women too. I mean, when you just show up as your authentic self, then people will just allow you to be. I'm kind of known for just saying things that a lot of people won't say, but I just say, hey, that's me, I'm showing up, and I don't care if you like it or not, and they really don't.
It's funny, you should bring that up, Jody, because I remember the very first time that you and I met. That's exactly what you did. It's like, I'm just going to show up and say it, and I make absolutely no apologies for it whatsoever. And I just immediately, it's like, okay, I got to hang out with Jody a little bit more, because, I loved that. That was the first thing that really impressed me about you when we first met.
Well, I try to, I guess, make myself space appropriate, but I'm not always good about that. Especially this month. It is National Masturbation Month, so I pretty much end up every conversation with telling people that, remember, good things come to those that masturbate.
I love that.
And we should clarify that May is National Masturbation Month in case whenever someone might be listening, but don't let that stop you if it's not May.
Yes.
Exactly. So we're ending this month with, no pun partially intended, with a bang.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So that actually brings up an interesting question with regards to the whole intimacy thing. Obviously, we want to emphasize and stress the fact that intimacy in its purest form is totally non-sexual. But if you want to bring in intimacy and the sexual and the sexuality and the intimacy, and if you want to have those together, how does that apply to masturbation?
Well, it's beautiful that you brought this up because one of the things that's hardest with anyone in a relationship is to love themselves first. So my big focus for this month has been self-love. And so every day I've been giving people tips on masturbation, but all of them are really about learning to love oneself and to explore oneself and our own bodies and to appreciate everything about us. One of the most beautiful exercises that it's not masturbation, but it's a great exercise in self-love, and it really hits that vulnerability spot for people, but it's standing there near naked and look at every single part of your body and love that part. Why do I love my forehead? Why do I love my pinky finger? And when you can do that and spend time with yourself and learn to love your whole body, that's usually where a lot of our shame comes from, is our bodies themselves. And so when we start the self-love with our own body, then that can exude out to loving ourselves in other ways, in our intellect, in our, in how we show up socially. But it starts with the body first.
Yeah. I believe that you were the one who actually originally taught me that. This was probably about a year or so ago. I remember you mentioning that particular exercise. It always stuck with me. And I remember the first time I tried that, it was hard. It was really, really tough. I mean, I could look myself in the eye and say I love you and sincerely and genuinely mean it. But when I was standing in front of the mirror, completely naked, looking at all of me and realizing there's lots of parts of me that I don't necessarily like and I'm not happy with, it was hard. It was really, really hard. Even now, I can do it much more easily now. But, oh, holy cow, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life.
Well, it is hard, and that's why when you can go through that exercise and you can really start to love your body and see that as part of your wholeness, then that can exude to the intimacy in other areas, with just innocuous relationships to an actual sexual relationship.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that do body shaming issues kind of start with someone else's judgment of ourselves, or does it start with our own judgment of ourselves?
Well, I definitely think that it comes more from the outside. There are some that have some actual issues to where, like body dysmorphia, where they don't see themselves as other people see them. But that's not the case for the majority of people. Most of it comes from the media and from what other people say. I mean, I had somebody yesterday just say that I needed to update my profile picture. Now, that doesn't seem like much, but think about that on on a daily basis where somebody was continuously telling you, you're not quite right, you're not quite right, you don't fit this, you don't fit that, and we're bombarded by that every day. And so it wears on us. We don't wear the right clothes, we don't have our hair done the right way. All of that crap that we see in the media, we take that on. Even some of the most healthy people can take on those little things a little bit at a time because they're so subtle.
So it's if it started at a young age and everyone got naked in front of the mirror and praised every part of them as they were growing up, it's ideally then a different message from the media, a different message from someone you meet. Your own happy, positive self-judgment wouldn't be overshadowed by anybody else's. I think that's the ideal place for us all.
If we could actually do that, ideally, I think it would be beautiful. I love the teachings of Osho. He believes that children should remain naked as long as possible because then they don't have hang-ups with sexuality and body image. All of that's normal to them. They see all kinds of different people and the beauty of the differences in everyone, and that just becomes a day-to-day norm for them.
I really, really love that. In fact, it's interesting because if you really look at cultures that are unplugged, that seems to be quite a common thing almost. Where children, and it's almost like a natural thing for children. In fact, I remember my grandson, it's like trying to, he hated clothes. I mean, he just wanted to just take them off all the time, and it was the most natural thing in the world. And, in a household where there were so many different people around all the time, unfortunately, because of the cultural norms, if you will, that we had, we were like trying to encourage him, it's like, when you go out into certain rooms or certain areas, you do need to be dressed. But it's funny because I always felt like it'd be just nice. It should just let it be, let it go. Don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the societies that have had.
Societies that have delay.
The societies that had the most like hang-ups and like the Puritan ethic and looking back through history, all the different layers of undergarments, making it hiding the body even more and more and more than indigenous people and tribes, right? So our hang-ups really do show up.
But it's kind of like when your parents say no, you have to touch the stove. You have to open the present. You have to find out what that forbidden thing is.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you just leave it out there and you can appreciate it and accept that as part of the norm, then it doesn't become a shameful thing.
Yeah. So here's a question for you with regard, and this is not necessarily a question that's meant as a criticism of religion or dogmatic approaches to life, but have you found, particularly where we live here in Salt Lake City and perhaps other communities that are very deeply conservative or dogmatic, that those body shaming issues tend to be more prevalent than in other areas? Again, taking into consideration the people that you work with and maybe excluding your social circles. Have you found that to be a common thing?
Well, I definitely do think it adds a layer to it because we already have the society imposed shame and expectations, and then we add to it the religious layer, and we can keep adding layers and layers and layers that will just magnify that. So yes, I definitely think it's just another layer of shame of not accepting ourselves as who we are.
Right. So how I guess the question that comes to my mind is, what are the dynamics that you've observed and that you would love to speak to with regards to the whole men and intimacy, with regards to everything that we just brought up with regard to shame, body image, all of that? Because I get a really, really strong sense that that is something that you are so passionate about. I know you've hinted at it in past conversations that we've had. I would love to have you just let loose right now on that and just let it go, let it all out.
Well, I mean, certainly I'm a woman, and so I'm a proponent for women's issues. We have a more complicated body composition, but I'm one that I am not going to brush men aside, because I think that we are starving ourselves as women by starving men. And, you know, I want that to come out to where we can appreciate everything about men. There's actually studies on men's bodies and what women tend to be more attracted to. And, you know, everybody has their own preferences, but the thing that society will teach us, you know, we really got to fix is the dad body. Well, the funny thing is more women are attracted to the dad body than they are the other kinds of body types.
How interesting.
So, I think so. You know, the dad body is sexy. All bodies are sexy for that matter.
True, yeah.
But I think we spend so much time in telling men that they have to feel this rock hard way, and they have to look this rock hard way, instead of just showing a love and appreciation for who they are and who their authentic self is. The most intimate relationships that I have with men are generally in conversation, to where they just will open up and they'll be real, and we make a real heart connection, just because, well, I think maybe I'm good at allowing that space to happen, but when they can show me who they really are, that just creates an intimacy that just can't be compared.
And is that really the first step to someone recognizes they don't have the intimate connections with other people that they desire, or even with themselves? Is it just beginning with conversation, being willing to speak their mind, to share themselves? Is that the beginning of the process to allowing more intimacy?
Well, I think that's a good part of the process. I just want to reiterate the body love. You know, like Althea said, that exercise that I talk about of looking in the mirror, that is really a difficult exercise. And it does get you into the space of loving all of yourself. And you do have to create that intimacy with yourself before you can create that intimacy for other people. But then, you know, when you do look to creating that intimacy with others in just simple interactions, you know, just a hug where you just hold on just a little bit longer, where you make a connection a little bit longer. In fact, I would challenge people to actually, next time you go hug somebody, do a heart hug. Heart hug, you know, we tend to go to the right and then we stick out our butts, okay? Now, a heart hug is instead where you go to the left, you make a heart connection, and then you connect your stomachs as well. Our stomachs are where we host our vulnerability. And when you can make that kind of connection with a person, it makes people a little bit nervous at first, but you open up a place for a new kind of intimate connection that is really innocuous. There's no harm in it.
Yeah. I love those heart hugs. And, it's amazing how so many people that you and I know both, but, strangers nowadays, they start to go to the right, I go to the left. I kind of almost force it. Without realizing I do, the heart hug and let the hearts touch so that they can feel that genuine love.
I've heard of the heart hug, and Lori and I teach it at workshops that we do as well, but I never took it further to realize, oh wait, the rest of your chakras are lining up as well too. So
yeah,
thanks for pointing out. So really down to the sacral, right down to our emotional base. That's cool.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, okay, think about if you picture going into a therapist's office. They have pillows on the couch. So what does a person do? They grab a pillow and they put it across their stomach. Right. They're protecting themselves. And so when you can make that kind of connection all the way to your stomach, then you can create a more intimate bond with someone else.
Isn't that fascinating? And it's interesting because one of the, I've been through lots of psychotherapy myself. I have such great love and respect for the science behind psychology and psychotherapy and so forth. And yet there seems to be almost like a fear there of being able to create an intimate connection because, you have to maintain your distance or whatever. Hence the pillows. I never even thought about that before.
Right.
So it is.
We do get lots of opportunities to put up these barriers. And I hate to call it an opportunity because that sounds like it's a positive thing when it's really not. But there's so many things out there that give us an easy way to create these barriers instead of being able to open ourselves up, and instead of barriers, create boundaries. Now, barriers are not a good thing. Boundaries are a wonderful thing.
I love that distinction. Because it's so true. I mean, barriers just keep us all separated from each other, but boundaries, all it is, it's like, okay, you know what, I can invite you here, or please don't step over it, but there's no barrier that's actually there. That's great.
Well, and I have to say, on the note of boundaries, that is an important thing to consider in intimacy as well, and this comes with authenticity as well, is when you clearly establish a boundary with a person, number one, it creates a space where you can command respect for yourself, but I think it also leads to that person to respecting you more because they know where you stand. And it's okay to push boundaries, of course, we all should, but we got to be willing to say no and stick with that no and expect people to honor that no. And when we know that our boundaries can be respected, it does allow us to open up to intimacy much, much more.
So how do you deal with, or how do you recognize if someone has an intimacy problem or if they have boundaries that maybe don't match yours? Like, I know people that just say they don't like to be hugged. They say they don't like it. They don't talk about a hang up. They don't feel horrible about it, but they just don't like to be touched. So is that an intimacy issue or is that just something else?
Well, that can be a lot of different things. Some people have an actual reason why they don't like to be touched. But if you look to what they're doing, like in the NICU unit. These babies are being held right from the very beginning because they find that if babies don't get this intimate touch, then they can die. But babies that do have that on a consistent basis will thrive. Now, I think that there may be a small amount of individuals that really do have issues with touch, and that can stem from a lot of things. But I think a lot of it just comes from people not being allowed a safe space to where they can accept physical touch. You know, and sometimes you got to respect people's boundaries, but, you know, if you give them a safe space, you may find that those boundaries are pushed.
Yeah, yeah.
And do we all create barriers because of a fear of intimacy? Is there a fear of being so intimate that, you know, it's the risk of getting hurt is kind of what where we're trying to keep from happening?
Absolutely. You know, fear is, intimacy is really a bigger risk than sex. Because, you know, you can really go out and have sex with anyone and then be able to walk away and be done. With intimacy, though, you're giving people a real part of yourself. And so, yeah, it's a bigger barrier. But this is what I would encourage people to do. Is when someone comes up against something that they're afraid of, then just ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen? And then when that answer comes up, ask yourself again, okay, if that happens, what's the worst that can happen? And pretty soon you keep doing that and you realize that whatever your fear is a bunch of bullshit anyway.
And it is funny pointing out that the notion of, well, it was just sex. It didn't mean anything. Yeah, it's easy to just blow off sex. It's hard to blow off intimacy. And I think, you know, especially for a man to confess that, I really like that girl I met for the one night stand. You know, it's like, no, it means nothing. And it's an easier act to carry on.
Mm-hmm.
It is. You know, we certainly, depending on what our feeling is into going into a sexual interaction, we can leave all feelings aside. You can't do that when you're creating some sort of intimacy with people.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I want to stress that intimacy doesn't mean sex. So you can be intimate with friends and neighbors and family and sexual partners as well.
Absolutely. Well, when I give someone a handshake, I like to take their hand and then put my other hand over their hand. Now, that's a really intimate handshake. But did anybody get hurt in that?
Yeah, it's not.
Not at all.
It's not that.
But it creates more of a connection between.
Yeah. Cool. So you should go to the White House and teach the proper etiquette of intimate handshaking.
Yeah, I probably won't be allowed at the White House, but.
Although that one handshake that you know, President Macron from France, you know, it's like, you know, when Trump was wanting to disengage, he held him and, you know, made him know it's like, no, this is serious. This is something intimate that we need to be serious about this relationship.
Yeah, I've never seen so many articles and headlines about a single handshake as that.
Right.
But how transformative would it be to go to Congress and have everyone do the naked in front of a mirror trick, or, you know? Politicians that
I'd love to see that. Maybe let's not go that far. Let's do the heart hug. Let's teach the heart hug first.
Yeah.
Well, let's start the heart hug and then we'll go to the full length mirror.
Right. That's their homework when they go home.
Yeah.
that would become the House of Horrors at that point.
Well, here we go. Are we taking part in body shaming by saying that, right?
Right, we are, and it's in that very.
That's true.
We do, exactly. See, I caught myself, and we caught ourselves there.
Yeah, because it could be a beautiful thing.
It could absolutely be a beautiful thing.
So, are there other exercises or strategies beyond the mirror, beyond beginning? Well, it all begins with self-love, I find, in anything. But are there other things you can share, Jody, about techniques or next steps to help people to open up to more intimate lifestyles or relationships?
Absolutely. Especially in this day and age where we're connected to our phones and we're connected to the TV and everything else. The biggest thing is to be present. And so if you can have some moments of real presence in your relationship, sit down with your significant other and just completely let everything go and make sure that you two have dedicated time to where all you're going to do is be present with each other. It doesn't matter what's going to be said. Don't talk about, the problems in the house or the problems with the job or anything. Just sit there, and even if you say absolutely nothing at all, take 5 minutes and say, I'm just going to be present with you right now. And then switch and let that person be completely present with you. For a full 5 minutes, just focus on nothing but that person.
It's interesting because my husband and I actually do that quite a lot. We're both very, very busy, but once he gets home, there's at the very least, the last 30 minutes before we go to bed, time that we just sit and are present with each other. And that's especially true where we have one day a week that is exclusively ours. We may invite others, of our family and friends to join us in that time, but it is a day that is exclusively ours. And it is, as far as we're concerned, that's non-negotiable. It's our time.
That's awesome because I think, we'll say I'm too busy, but if you're too busy to spend just that simple 10 minutes with each other, then think about all the hours that you're going to spend in splitting a home and finding a new place to live and going through court with a divorce or whatever. I think that 10 minutes is a very cheap price to pay.
So true. So true.
And that amount of time used to exist naturally in our lifestyles before we had the devices and the distractions and the 900 channels of TV and all that stuff, right? There's not.
Oh, I did.
Or is there yet? Is there an intimacy app?
Well, there are some, but well, it's funny. I mean, one of the things I teach is, which is an actual it's a beautiful practice, but there's actually an to learn this intimacy technique.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm not really a big fan of using an app for intimacy.
Left to our own devices, I would venture to say that really intimacy is very natural to us.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch what you said.
No, left to our own devices, I would say that intimacy is a very natural thing for all human beings.
Well, I think so. I think if we were to look at a person maybe that was completely secluded for a period of time, I think the first thing that they would seek out would probably be human touch.
Yeah.
I'm not a sociologist, but that's that is my opinion.
Actually, it's funny because there are studies done by sociologists that show that's exactly what people who have been in isolation go for, is that human touch. So you're spot on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think it's like all the blocks we've talked about. It's societal teaching to get us away from our natural state, our natural inclinations. Like every baby's born loving their body and being amazed by it, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, they even, babies are known to even masturbate in the womb. And so they even look for that intimacy with themselves, even from that point. And so, you know, that's a simple self-love kind of thing. And, you know, to touch on actually masturbation one more time, because I know people throw a fit when I bring up that. But, you know, a person that actually learns healthy practices along the lines of masturbation, they actually get rid of the addictions and things like that, because they actually learn to love themselves, and they learn a new respect for masturbation and what that is. But we have to focus on self-love and self-intimacy before we can spread that outward.
Indeed.
And Louise Hay has always taught that if you have a headache, masturbate, and that clears your headache too.
Yeah, it does. The hormones that are released during masturbation or sex can actually release pain.
So the stereotypical bad sitcom of the 50s excuse of "not tonight, honey, I have a headache," like the sex would get rid of that headache.
Absolutely.
Oh, it reminds me of a comment that a friend of mine made one time about the whole headache thing. But I'll share that offline.
No. You have an intimacy block there, my friend.
All right. I'll just say it right out. He's like, one time, you know, his wife was like, "Oh, I have a headache." And he's like, "That's okay. I don't want to fuck your head."
I don't think that would work as well.
No, I don't think so either. But it just made me laugh.
You know, on the note of intimacy, there has been a lot of new technology and such that's coming out that really teaches like massage between couples. That is something that we don't really practice. You know, we think of a massage as either you go see a professional, or it's like, "Oh, honey, do I really have to do this?" And we look at it as kind of a chore and something that's going to take a lot of effort. But there's actually some beautiful massage techniques that you can practice within a couple that are non-stressing, non-taxing, but they create a beautiful intimacy between the two of you.
Mm-hmm. And then we're talking about intimate massage, non-sexual massage.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Right. So it touch for the sake of touch. No ulterior motive.
Absolutely. And going into it with that being a clear boundary, there's no expectations from this, so that you can both just be present with it.
Mm-hmm. Do men sometimes have challenges respecting those boundaries?
I think it depends both on the intent of both people going into it. Mm-hmm. If they're both clear that this is a boundary, mm-hmm. Then I don't really see that there's issues with it.
Gotcha.
If it goes into a situation where either party is going, "Yeah, this isn't going to turn into sex," wink, 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 well, then you already know that's not going to work out.
Right.
But you have to go with the right intent and set those clear boundaries right away and honor each other that you're going to keep that boundary.
That makes sense. I love that.
So what other ways, how does the ability to be more intimate, how does it enhance anyone's life beyond relationships, beyond sexual activity as well? Does it affect other areas of life?
It absolutely does. Because intimacy, and let's take it to the physical touch, but the touch can release a lot of different hormones that can help in our health. But just think how this can move out to business as well, which of course affects our finances. But what if you learn how to be really present with someone and, really show them an intimacy in that way? Let's say you're in customer service. Then when you can show an intimate bond with that person, a completely non-sexual, non-personal, just being present with that person, how you could diffuse a situation in customer service. I mean, if you're a salesperson and you're truly present and you're there, the person isn't going to feel like you're just after their money. They're going to feel like you really care about them, which is going to increase your sales. So yes, in every arena of our life, intimacy is going to have a huge impact.
Cool. And I really didn't think of it that it can enhance, again, every relationship, not just your personal relationships, your, the person you spend 5 minutes with, that brief relationship, or a sales relationship or work relationship. All of that can be enhanced by our own comfort with and willingness to be intimate.
Right. Well, I'll take a situation where this guy that I had met once, he saw a lot of the things I did. He saw me in some personal interactions and stuff and expressed interest in really getting to know me. Well, then we had an opportunity to sit down and talk one day, and all of a sudden he's distracted by something else while we're in mid-conversation. So he broke that intimate connection between us. And then, he reaches out again and says, I'd like to take you out to coffee and get to know you better. My answer was, hell no. You broke our intimacy there in breaking off a conversation with me. I'm not going to give you a chance to continue breaking that intimacy with me.
Yeah, true. I've been guilty of that myself at times. If I'm, like, for instance, at a conference or something, and there's people who are coming by that I know, and I'm saying hi and so forth. I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's a commitment that I made to myself recently, and that is to be more present, especially in a crowd, especially where there might be a bunch of people that I might know and want to say hello to and so forth. If I'm engaged in a one-on-one conversation with somebody in that particular moment, to block them out. And, the only option at that particular point is to be fully present and engaged with that one person, having an intimacy with that one person. So I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Well, and that's an interesting thing to bring up too, because you don't want to ignore the other people. But maybe that's a good time to take that person's hand in both of your hands so that they know that you're still present with them. And then turn around and say, Jane, it's so great to see you. I can't wait to catch up sometime. But then that person that you're with still knows that you're present.
That's a great technique. A great technique. So, see, I'm glad I mentioned that.
Yeah, that really is great. And we're getting to an hour into this, so before we get too much further, Jody, how can people best connect with you, track you down, learn more about working with you?
Well, absolutely. You can go to find me on Facebook, Jody Bailey, or my company's called The Erotic Life. You can email me at jodybaileyspeaks@gmail.com. So I'll just give out those arenas. Any of those you could actually connect with my phone number. I prefer that somebody sends me a message, either Facebook or email. There's going to, especially because now there's some really huge things happening in my world, and so I'm going to be having to do a lot more things in the middle of the night to respond back to people. So if I may really quickly, I would like to talk about a couple of those things just really briefly.
Sure.
Well, one of the things that's coming up locally in the Salt Lake market is the Divorcee Cafe. I'm going to be one of the professionals that'll be a part of that has a lot of resources for people that will be going through divorce. Another thing is, I was mentioning some new technology coming out. There's a device coming out that's called the Hive. Right now, I'm one of just a handful of instructors in the whole world, but I'm the only one that has a device right now. And so it's a device that was really designed for women's sexual health, but it is a wonderful device that couples can use together to create intimacy. That's really wonderful. And also, once again, locally I'm going to be bringing a $30 million erotic art exhibit here to the Salt Lake market, but that's going to be a traveling exhibit at some point. And so hopefully I'll be visiting other areas as well with the exhibit. So a lot of exciting things going on.
Oh, very cool.
Oh, I should also, jump in really quick and mention your podcast as well, Jody. You also have a podcast, the Erotic Life podcast, that you do. That's a weekly podcast, right?
That is, and it is called The Erotic Life, and it's on SoundCloud, so definitely people can find me there. I also have a blog on WordPress that's also called The Erotic Life.
Wonderful.
So your life is rather erotic.
It is erotic. It's about living a life turned on.
Oh, I love that. That's great. Living a life turned on. Cool. Well, I'm going to say you are very turned on. This has been a fun conversation and really a fun way to bring National Masturbation Month to a close.
Yes.
So I do want to thank you for joining us. Thank you, Apio. Thank you for everyone joining us live. Real Men Feel will be live again next Tuesday, June 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be joined by combat vet and healer Mike Marshausen to discuss spirituality for men. So until then, keep loving yourself, keep getting intimate with yourself and others, choose boundaries, not barriers, right? And visit realmenfeel.org, check us out on Facebook, keep listening to the podcast, and check out the Erotic Life podcast with Jody. And thanks everyone for joining us today.
Have a great night, folks.
Thank you for listening to Real Men Feel. Until next time, visit realmenfeel.org, join the Real Men Feel group on Facebook, and share what you thought of this show. Please give this podcast a review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you are discovering Real Men Feel. Reach out to us at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Learn more about Andy Grant at theandygrant.com and Apio Hunter at apiohunter.com.